A Super El Nino is coming in 2026, and boy, Western Europe are already feeling it. Me, I am from Southeastern Europe. Every summer we get months that we get 100, 110 degrees Fahrenheit for people watching from Europe. That's like 40 to 45 degrees Celsius. We've got ACs. We don't have any problems with it because we're used to fucking Saharan temperatures. But people from Western Europe, from Northern Europe, yeah, they are suffering.
Something is shifting in the Pacific Ocean. It's not a storm or a current you can see from the surface, but a slow, powerful buildup of heat spanning thousands of kilometers. And it's been playing a dangerous game of hide and seek.
Yep.
Now, out there for all to witness, the Pacific Ocean is undergoing a violent flip. The latest information suggests we are on the precipice of a Super El Niño, possibly the strongest El Niño event in 140 years.
Oh shit. So an El Nino, as far as I know, happens every 5 to 10 years. A Super El Nino looks like happens once every century. So, you know, fuck us, I guess.
A very rare high-intensity episode that would propel global temperatures into uncharted territory. This isn't a seasonal shift, it's a global reorganization of energy. According to the latest data, there is now a 98% chance of El Nino emerging by August. And by September 2026, the rise of a full-blown Super El Nino is now almost inevitable.
Wait, so Super El Nino will be happening in the fall, not in the summer? Well, he said August, but he's saying September is most likely, and we are getting it.
This kind of El Nino would see intensified heat waves, floods, droughts, and shifts in monsoon and hurricane patterns all around the world. Indeed, could a 2026 Super El Nino push our climate past the point of no return? I'm James Stewart, and you're watching Astrum Earth. Join me today as we look at the mechanics of this climate engine. We'll discuss why 2026 is becoming the perfect storm for a record-breaking event. And we'll look at what a planet already pushed to the brink by climate change does when its largest natural cooling mechanism...
And every single century, these Super El Ninos and these El Ninos will be getting much and much worse because of us humans. What a time to be alive.
...is replaced by
I'm being so depressing right now.
I didn't expect to be making this video quite as quickly as I am, to be honest with you. Let me take you back a few months to a video I made about the weak La Nina we had in 2025 that went into 2026. In fact, it was so weak, we suggested in that video that a Pacific flip was possible, a kind of climate whiplash, where after months of La Nina's cold pattern, the Pacific would be primed to swing hot and bring on a sort of monster of an El Nino. Now, when I made that video, the chances of that actually happening were quite low, and we didn't know how hot things might get, if indeed they would at all. But as it turns out, that prediction was...
Yeah, surprisingly, February and January, where I live in Southeastern Europe, were very warm and not as rainy.
Bang on, and
so far, it's not as hot here. Usually, it's 45 degrees Celsius, 105, 110 Fahrenheit.
True, unfortunately.
Which I'm very used to since I was a little kid.
And things are escalating.
Like this is where I live, by the way. This is where I live, the Balkans.
Pretty quickly. So here's a quick recap if you missed that video. The El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, is a term used to describe a cycle of variations in the Pacific Ocean's surface temperatures and air pressure near the equator. Normally, trade winds drive warm surface water from near South America, the Eastern Pacific, towards Asia. As that warm water moves away from South America, cold water rises to replace it in a process called upwelling. This situation is called ENSO neutral. Now, if those trade winds are weaker than usual, this upwelling effect lessens, resulting in a warmer patch in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. If those sea surface temperatures rise by more than half a degree Celsius above average, then that is an El Nino. Conversely, when trade winds are stronger, ocean temperatures dip below average, and we see a La Nina develop, where those temperatures are more than half a degree Celsius lower than average. This cycle lasts between 9 and 12 months and repeats every 2 to 7 years. And at the time of
9 to
recording,
12
we're
months.
in an ENSO neutral state, at least according to NOAA. But not for much longer. During an El Nino, Eastern Pacific sea surface temperatures usually do reach around 1 to 3 degrees Celsius above normal, shifting tropical convection currents and jet streams. This typically brings wetter winters to California and some regions in South America, and drier conditions to Australia, Indonesia, and southern Africa. In fact, one strange quirk of El Nino is that it tends to suppress Atlantic hurricanes. What it does is increase upper level winds across the tropical Atlantic. That then creates wind shear that pulls apart tropical storm systems before they can develop into the hurricanes.
Yo, what is this called? What is this type of science called? I forgot the name. The study of climate and the weather is fucking cool as fuck.
But unfortunately, it's bad news elsewhere because it enhances the potential for Pacific storms. That's due to an increase in energy in the ocean because warm surface water fuels the development of tropical storms, which turn into cyclones.
Yeah.
It also generally raises global temperatures by 0.1 to 0.2 degrees Celsius above trend, often producing the warmest years on record if they coincide with ongoing warming. Now, I should point out at this point that this is not a new concept, nor is having an El Nino a product of climate change. It's a natural part of our planet, a heartbeat that's been thumping for at least 10,000 years. I mean, we have evidence of
and throughout millennia, throughout thousands and millions of years, the planet has always changed throughout different eras, ice ages and hot ages and so on. I'm not an expert on all of these things, but there's interesting videos you can look. Maybe I should react to a video on that. That's very fucking interesting. I love that stuff.
Chemical fingerprints in ancient,
like all the different eras and weather patterns and the Earth has gone through since its beginning. Plus, the continents were in different places, which also impacted the. Also, the Earth was closer or further away from the sun in different.
Coral fossils and sediment cores stretching back long before the first steam engine was even built.
Scary.
But this year feels different. Something sinister is brewing out there, and it's starting to look very much like we're heading for a Super El Nino. Now, some housekeeping here on what actually constitutes a Super El Nino, because I'll be honest with you, if you're asking a scientist, that term doesn't actually exist, but it does make for a good media headline and title on this thumbnail.
Yeah, also think about it. Humans throughout millennia, like Homo sapiens have existed for like 200,000 years. The human species have existed for like 2 million years. Like, we've lived in different eras, for fuck's sake. We have gone through hundreds, if not thousands of different Super El Niños or whatever weather patterns. We will survive. We will be fine, but we should be ready. As in modern 2026 society, we should be getting ready for stuff like this because there's gonna be way more damage done now that we are a higher population and that we have more to lose now as creatures that have built up this society.
Noah.
Compared to, a Super El Nino 500 years ago. Not that. Who gives a shit about people 500 years ago?
Right on the forefront of this stuff, monitor El Nino with a measure called the Oceanic Nino Index, or ONI. It's basically
I was going to try and say, not that I should be, minimizing their losses in bad times, but it was 500 years ago.
Running mean of sea surface temperature relative to a 30-year base. So El Nino is declared, as we said, when that ONI goes above 0.5 degrees Celsius for 5 or more overlapping seasons. And just to make things a bit more complicated, NOAA recently changed to a new kind of measuring index called the Relative ONI Index to account for increased background warming, which it didn't previously. So, within this new way of measuring how strong an El Nino actually is, they class a weak one as between 0.5 and 1 degrees Celsius, a moderate one would be between 1 and 1.5 degrees Celsius, and a strong El Nino is 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. So therefore, with a bit of creative license, a Super El Nino would be somewhere 2 degrees Celsius above average or more. And despite not having a proper term for it, that has happened before. In fact, it's happened 4 times since NOAA started these measurements. In 1982, 1991, 1997, and most
This is a Super El Niño?
2015.
Wait, so I've been through this. I was born in 2001, so I've already been through a Super El Niño. Like, I remember in 2015 going to beach vacations and shit for like weeks throughout the summer. I didn't give a shit. Maybe I was a kid and I didn't notice it because I was an idiot. But I thought this happened like once in a century.
In every single case, each relative ONI rating was more than 2 degrees Celsius. And in November 2015, the index was a whopping 2.4 degrees Celsius. That's more than strong. I mean, that rating was looking for a phone booth to take off its glasses and don a superhero cape with. In all seriousness though, these giant events have globe-spanning consequences. The 2015 El Nino coincided with severe drought in Ethiopia, water shortages in Puerto Rico, and an extraordinary Central Pacific hurricane season, all combining to produce record global warmth. More than 60 million people were affected, with extreme food insecurity
mostly people around the equator, yep.
Primarily across Africa, Central America, and the Pacific. It triggered the most devastating global coral bleaching event in history, and the impacts weren't just felt environmentally. $3.9 trillion was wiped from the global economy in the following 3 years due to the lost agriculture.
And we need more trillion-dollar losses after COVID, after fucking wars, and now this! Great. Hey, I'm not religious, but if God exists, why the hell are you doing this to us? God damn.
Infrastructure damage.
Please.
So, is history about to repeat itself again? As
Probably.
of early 2026, the tropical Pacific returned to an ENSO-neutral state after that weak La Nina we spoke about. But don't be fooled, because that's just on the surface. It's what's brewing below that's starting to ring alarm bells. NOAA reports that ocean subsurface heat content has been climbing for months and is now well above normal. In March to April 2026, meteorologists observed bursts of westerly winds driving warm water eastward, a classic precursor to El Nino. Now, usually Pacific trade winds are easterly, holding warm water in the west, but those winds are faltering. As they weaken, a series of Kelvin waves, massive pulses of warm water, are traveling thousands of miles across the ocean. And when they hit the South American coast, they sort of uncork the heat, and suddenly you've got all this energy just sat there waiting to be unleashed. In fact, NASA have just caught one of these Kelvin waves in action with the Sentinel-6 Michael Freilich satellite. You can clearly see it cross the Pacific Ocean and hit the South American coast. But here's the catch, because on top of the natural cycle happening, this time we're layering a natural surge onto a planet that's already spent 12 consecutive months above the 1.5 degree warming threshold.
Oh, shit.
2024 was the hottest year on record, and it occurred during an ENSO-neutral year. There was no extra heating boost from El Nino. So before we even add in a naturally occurring event that increases temperatures, we're already working with a much higher baseline, and that's a problem. It's a bit like a loaded spring. That heat hasn't fully reached the surface yet, but when it does, it can rapidly trigger El Nino conditions. The scary thing is that exact same pattern showed up before the 1997 and 2015.
So are you telling me that this Super El Nino might be 3 Celsius more? Like above 3 Celsius? For the past consecutive, 12 months, you said? We're already above 1.6 something?
Per El Ninos too. So the big question is then, how big is this one going to be? Well, for starters, NOAA's Climate Prediction Center has placed the odds of El Nino emerging by July at 82%, with a 37% chance of a very strong El Nino by winter 2026. The UK and European estimates are, how do I put this, a little more aggressive. Met Office data here in the UK shows 2 degrees Celsius anomalies by September 2026. And the ECMWF, the European Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, shows there is a chance of temperature anomalies exceeding 3 degrees before October.
This is what I said.
Taking us well into super territory. Indeed, on the other side of the scale to NOAA, according to the ECMWF, the odds of a Super El Nino by July have already climbed beyond 50%. And as
It's July, it's not hot where I am. Very normal temperatures for me. Very hot temperatures for Western Europe. Western Europeans are dying because they have no ACs. Meanwhile, the house where I grew up in has 3 ACs. Now I live in a small apartment by myself. It has 1 AC, but it's always on.
As we approach winter, its emergence appears inevitable. Just a quick word of caution when it comes to data. And
well, I mean, we're going to get through it, man.
I know you know this, but I just have to sort of say it. Forecasters do note that models tend to overshoot El Nino strength in the spring, and the outcome actually depends on whether those westerly winds continue what they're doing. But because they're doing it right now, that's...
So basically, if September comes and shit hasn't gone insanely wildly bad, we're good. Probably. Most likely. Nothing's going to happen.
That's where these numbers come from. However you choose to interpret those numbers is up to you, but what I think we can deduce for certain is that the environment is primed for a strong event. So, if we do end up with the fabled Super El Nino, well, what does that mean for us? The short answer is amplified extremes. All the usual El Nino effects would be supercharged. It'd be like driving around in your car playing your music with your bass turned up to maximum, you know? The first and perhaps most obvious thing we've already touched on, there would be a record-breaking global heat spike. Each El Nino year brings hotter conditions globally, and even without the help of all the extra greenhouse gas emissions, we'd usually expect somewhere in the region of 0.1 to 0.2 degrees worth of increase. But for a Super El Nino, well, that could push temperatures in 2026, 2027 to unprecedented heights, the hottest years on record, exceeding 1.7, even 1.8 degrees above.
They always say this. I'm not saying that they're wrong, but they always say this. And it's sad and scary and depressing. Since I was born.
Pre-industrial levels. In the most extreme scenarios, sea surface temperature anomalies in the Pacific region approach a stark 3.8 degrees Celsius by the year end. And when you consider that the IPCC wanted to limit warming to just 1.5 degrees, you start to see just how extreme this really is. And it's not just the temperatures we should be worrying about either. There will be a series of extreme precipitation patterns in every corner of the planet.
You know what we all need? Like the last thing we need, remember COVID, right? It traveled mostly in hot weather. Yeah. If we're gonna get a virus as well that travels because of hot weather and humidity and shit, yeah, we're gonna be doomed. We're gonna be doomed.
A Super El Nino would bring torrential rains to the coast
this
of
will
Peru
not
and
be
Ecuador.
this dramatic.
But inland, the Amazon rainforest would face a thermal stress test. By combining intense droughts with record-breaking temperatures, trees would be pushed beyond their tolerance limits. Previous Super El Ninos have seen the Amazon switch from a carbon sink to a carbon source, as drought kills off massive swathes of the canopy. In 2026, with the base...
There's tons of fires all around my country or my region of the planet every single summer, like 100 miles off of my city, every year, every summer, there's probably like 100 fires, small to big ones.
Temperature already higher, the risk of mega fires in the world's lungs would be at an all-time high.
Yeah, like remember the wildfires of Australia? Those are fucking insane.
In North America, the jet stream is expected to split. So the US Southwest and California would get a sort of Godzilla winter with heavy snowpack and torrential rains. Now this may help relieve reservoirs in the short term, but it brings the immediate threat of atmospheric rivers, long plumes of water vapor coming in from the tropics. These events can trigger catastrophic landslides and cause localized flooding. Meanwhile, the Pacific Northwest would experience unusually hot and dry conditions. On the other side of the world, in Australia, the news is also sobering. The Bureau of Meteorology has already issued a below-average rainfall forecast for the eastern and southwestern parts of the country, and it's not just the lack of rain. Farmers in New South Wales are facing a perfect storm. They're still recovering from the massive floods of previous years, but now they could be hit by a triad of pressures: intensifying drought, extreme bushfire risk, and a global spike in fertilizer and fuel costs, all thrown into one. As we touched on earlier as well, El Nino does something strange to traditional hurricane patterns. Generally, it tends to tilt the odds of Pacific cyclones and reduce the number of Atlantic hurricanes. In 2015, for example, during the strongest El Nino we've ever seen so far, the Central Pacific had an unusually active cyclone season. In total, there were 16, including 3 simultaneous Category 4 storms. It was crazy.
Holy shit, I didn't know this. In 2015, I was 14 years old. I did not know about this. Holy shit. So, we're already, the world's economy is already in shambles. We're already struggling in many ways. Fuel and shit is already high up. Hopefully the war stops once and for all with Iran, but, you know, wars never stop, sadly. And now agriculture is going to be massively impacted by this, whether it's very dry regions or insane amounts of rainfall and floods. Both will destroy crops and will make food more expensive, more scarce, sadly, and we will get a lot of infrastructure damaged and in need to be repaired.
So a 2026 Super El Nino would likely mean, a quieter Atlantic season, which is...
Does this mean that Jesus is coming?
Good news for the US East Coast, but terrible
I'm not
news
religious,
for
but
Pacific cyclones that affect
if he's going to save us,
and beyond, and you guessed it.
Okay, I'm going to believe in it.
Historically, El Ninos have caused fish declines and even penguin die-offs in the Galapagos due to changes in ocean currents. A Super El Nino would only magnify these biological stresses. And all of that before we've even gotten to the thing that keeps us alive: food. I mean, even now, climate analysts are already warning that a strong El Nino could significantly strain food supplies. The India Meteorological Department has pegged the 2026 monsoon at just...
Oh, India is in huge trouble, man. India is not that far from the equator. It's already very hot. Massively impacted by Super El Nino. India not having enough food supply and not having, a well-functioning agriculture. That's 1 billion people right there struggling.
22%.
And it's already filled with poverty and people struggling.
Its long period average, the lowest in nearly 30 years. And that has a direct threat to the Kharif crops, the staples, things like rice, cotton, and soybeans that literally feed billions of people.
Yeah.
If the rains fail in August and September, we aren't just looking at dry fields. We're looking at food inflation that could exceed 4.5%, destabilizing the rural economy for the entire subcontinent. And there's another twist in this too. The Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit just released an article noting that an El Nino-driven weather shock on top of war-related fertilizer and fuel disruptions could drive up both prices and inflation. In short, harvests in those key farming regions, so rice in Asia, coffee in Africa, maize in Latin America, would majorly suffer, amplifying hunger and economic stress not just locally, but across the entire planet. Analysis by the United Nations World Food Programme warned that the number of food insecure people across the globe could reach levels last seen at the start of the Russian-Ukraine invasion in 2022, impacting up to 318 million people across the globe who are already food insecure. Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? Sorry for that tirade of information. If you aren't looking for a scrap of good news, well, as good as can be, come to Europe.
Give us some.
Over here where I am in the UK and into mainland Europe, El Nino's influence is more indirect. Some studies suggest El Nino's winters tend to be milder and wetter in northern Europe, but the signal is pretty weak, and the summer impacts are even less predictable. If you look back at some of the developing El Nino years in 1997 and 2015 and even 2023, they all featured at least some hot spells, but no simple pattern or something that unified them in any way. But of course, thanks to our good old friend global warming, any El Nino effect might actually be quite hard to disentangle from the ongoing trend of record summer heat in Europe anyway, so either way. And all of that stuff we've just talked about doesn't just have a human cost. There is also quite a large financial one. In 2023, researchers from Dartmouth...
I did not pre-watch this video, by the way. This is just basic human knowledge, okay?
University estimated the average El Nino saps about $3.4 trillion from the global economy. That's because
Holy
of destroying crops,
shit.
preventing the flow of goods.
In reference, my little ass, dumbass country's GDP is like, I think the 2026 GDP of my country is like $15 billion, euros. Yeah, that's great.
And services, all that kind of stuff. Now that's just the estimate for an average.
Wait, 13 trillion, he said, right? Let me just go back.
$3.4 trillion.
3 point or 13?
Estimated the average El Nino saps about $3.4 trillion.
3.4 trillion. Let's see what's the world's GDP. So the world's GDP sits at 126 trillion. Yeah, that's a huge, insane, substantial amount of the whole world's GDP.
Global economy. That's because of destroying.
And the hardest hit countries and the countries that will struggle the most, because that GDP isn't, scattered all across the world evenly. It's very obvious which countries will struggle the most.
Crops, preventing the flow of goods and services, all that kind of stuff. Now that's just the estimate for an average El Nino. So a super El Nino would be far more devastating. None of that makes for great reading at all, does it, really?
Yeah, great positive news
about any of this for us at all, which does sort of beg the question, why is this happening in the first place? Well, you might assume it's because of global warming, which is sort of what I think as well. But bear with me here because this sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but scientists are actually continuing to study how global warming affects the El Nino Southern Oscillation cycle. And the truth, they say, isn't clear-cut. Look, as I've alluded to in this video, El Nino isn't new, nor is it particularly special. It used to be like that uncle you saw at family events every couple of years who sort of said something weird and then you never saw him again until the next event. But this time something is clearly different. The UN's warned that Earth's climate is further out of balance right now than at any other time in recorded history. So how can both things
I've heard that news 100 times throughout my life. So it's just getting worse and worse?
True. I mean, based on that, good old Uncle Enzo would have rocked up to the party at some point anyway, right? Well, yeah, but today's ocean is warmer than decades past. The WMO notes that 2015 to 2025 ocean temperatures were the hottest 11-year span on record, with Earth gaining heat faster than ever. More than 90% of the Earth's extra energy also heats the oceans, and according to the WMO, the heat stored in the upper 2 kilometers of global oceans reached a new high in 2025. Over the last 2 decades, it's been warming more than twice as quickly as it was during the late 20th century. Add into that a series of late winter westerly wind bursts that have injected heat eastward, pumping up the tropical Pacific's heat content even more, and the state.
So it's been warming for twice as fast and twice as much. Yo, future generations are not just effed with AI, with everything being more expensive, with wars. They're gonna be facing a whole other different world much sooner than they should be. Even my my grandparents have told me, well, like when they were my age, temperatures did not go up to that, that degree. They told me, like where I live, right, my part of the world, they would say, yeah, 100 plus degrees Fahrenheit, 40 plus degrees Celsius, even less. That shit did not exist throughout our summers. Like they were able to live throughout, the whole summer to survive without an AC. They were okay. And I'm like, what? If I don't have an AC for the summer, I'm gonna die. Something to think about. Imagine 100 years from now.
Potentially very strong or even super event. If or indeed when that happens, it will escalate into a super El Nino, the likes of which we've only seen a few times in history. And that will supercharge global warming and extremes around the planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
NOAA's Climate Prediction Center updates their ENSO predictions once a month. So maybe by the time you're watching this, we'll have more information. We may even be in the midst of a super El Nino. But what we do know is that super El Ninos have happened before, and they will likely happen again. And whatever happens, it's going to be a wild, old ride watching this one play out.
Yeah, we as humanity, we need to be focusing on the right things. But nope, we're gonna be focusing on money, profit, and uh, yeah, stuff that will not change the world for the better and humanity for the better. It's all for profit. There we go. Tell me what you guys think in the comments. I think we will go through this and we will survive. Obviously, we will. It might get horrible. I mean, I hope it doesn't happen, but even if it doesn't happen this year, it eventually will happen. It happened in 2015, as the graph showed, so it does freaking happen. 11 years have passed since 2015, so I guess we're bound, we're bound for another one, I guess. And yeah, save up as much money as you can. Don't plan some extreme, extravagant, some stuff to do or to go, places to go. Because, yeah, August, September might get insane. Hopefully not. But, depending on where from the world you're watching this, you might get very dry, insane weather or huge storms. So yeah, tell me what you think and have a nice day. And keep safe.